Apologies, everybody. OBS just kind of went down there, and for unknown reasons, decided it didn't want to reconnect. So I can only assume that the horrendous storms has had some effect on it. But yeah, we're back again, and we will finish off with Pete, who I think was talking about Cyberpunk 2022. No, it wasn't 22. We're in 2022. Oh my god, what's going on? Oh my god, my brain just not with it today in any way, shape. Anyway, Pete, Cyberpunk, carry on.
Yeah, Cyberpunk 2020 there've been several attempts to kind of translate into a video game. Most of them were kind of basically a reskin job of an existing first-person shooter and then slapping the Cyberpunk 2020 brand on it. I said, hey, it's a Cyberpunk 2020 game. But Mike Pondsmith, the creator of Cyberpunk 2020, said, nope, I do not want just a rebranding. That's not what I want. It'd be just wrong. Now, but several companies did approach him with some really good ideas. I think the most prominent one was somebody who came with a really good idea. They'd start developing on it, and then about midway through the development, the head of the company that was developing this Cyberpunk 2020 game really got papers from the American government telling him to re-enlist. So he had to basically rejoin the army again, and that obviously completely canned development for them. Essentially being quiet. I mean, Cyberpunk V3 was a bit hit or mixed, to be fair. It didn't make the splash Mike Pondsmith had hoped for, and pretty much everything was quiet around Cyberpunk 2020 for several years. And then this news came out from almost nowhere saying, hey, there's going to be a Cyberpunk video game called 2077 released by the guys behind The Witcher 3, CD Projekt Red. And that kickstarted massive interest in the video games. I wrote an article about it for a magazine I cannot talk about because of contracts. Yay. And then from that, they kind of got interested in the role-playing game again, which we got Cyberpunk Red. So yeah, it's been a massive interest in the cyberpunk setting as a whole, really. I mean, have you played Cyberpunk 2077, Khaldoun?
Yes, yeah, I've played it on PC. It was very good. I played through it a few times. I thought the story elements were, really interesting. I really loved The Witcher 3. I thought that was probably one of the better video games I've, ever played. So I had very high expectations, and for the most part, I would say, they met it with the story elements, for Cyberpunk 2077, and I feel they really captured most of the spirit of the RPG. But as with most things, there's some things RPGs can do that video games cannot, and in a setting like Cyberpunk, there's especially in a setting like Cyberpunk, it is very difficult to program in all the different permutations and possibilities in that kind of setting. So I thought the video game was about as good as it could be given the limits of a video game.
Do you think they overpromised with the video game, and that's why you had so many issues at launch?
I have no idea. I mean, I doubt it. I suspect the major issue was, mostly just technical and time. That's how these things go. I've been on the side involved with some video game development, and I can say that it often comes down to a lot of ideas, a lot of problems that come up that you have to deal with eventually, and you just don't have the time or the money in the end to put in the future features at the same time you're squashing the bugs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not involved at all in CD Projekt Red, but my suspicion is that they wanted to release the game in 2020, and it's because Cyberpunk 2020 and the name of the game, and they kind of wanted to hit the kind of Christmas 2020 season, and so they kind of almost released it while they were still in bud squashing mode. But I will say this: they absolutely nailed the aesthetic of Cyberpunk 2020. Really, it wasn't just black and chrome. There's quite a few Cyberpunk settings that are really just lots of black and lots of chrome. They've really kind of gone for kind of almost psychedelic neon lit future. And I remember speaking to Mike Pondsmith a few years ago, and he said like there's a very specific aesthetic and tone to Cyberpunk. It's like basically walking out the bar late at night, when it just after it's rained, and going, so what now? And kind of they really kind of nailed that sort of kind of neon psychedelia of Cyberpunk 2020.
I'm sort of. It's good that he sort of, instead of just going with the first computer game company who wanted to make a game of his RPG, that he sort of waited for one that could probably do it justice. Granted, obviously, all bugs and stuff aside, it is, and I've not played it yet because I was going to wait for all the bugs to get fixed and stuff. But it is apparently a very good game when it works properly. But you've got a lot of companies like Games Workshop and stuff. He'll just give their IP to anybody, and I personally think that damages your brand slightly. Because you're just known as sort of having naff games and stuff. Like I talk about Games Workshop because they're not as bad now, but they used to be really bad. Like literally just give it to anybody, and they had some really naff stuff. Naff movies, naff sort of games, and I think you really need to sort of be picky with who takes on your IP.
Have you played any of the V5 games at all? On the there's the Blood Hunt.
The only one I've actually played, the only V5 video game other than they had this Vampire Jam recently, actually, where they had community content. People make video games, and a couple of those were very good. I played one where it was kind of a almost like city resource manager with like you had a coterie, and it was very political and had timers. It reminded me of Cult Simulator from Steam. A game I like. I think it was called Praxis, and that was very good. But as far as the official releases, I actually haven't played any of them except of the new games, Blood Hunt, the Battle Royale, which I like. I like Battle Royale, so that's perfect for me. Play Nosferatu in a Battle Royale, sure. and of course, just so you guys know, you'll have to reinstall it now. Bloodlines, from the original Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, that was such a good game. Yeah, that was really good game. Yeah, I mean, I just love the music in it. They really nailed the kind of feel of it, and just walking around the city at night, and just like you could look up and see the rain falling. Which, I mean, we're talking like late 90s, early 2000 graphics, so it wasn't the most visually stunning game, but immersiveness and storytelling was just fantastic. Some fantastic writing.
Yeah, they just released the soundtrack actually. Yeah.
Okay, right. I know what I'm doing after this one.
I didn't realize it was that old, to be honest. I don't, That being said, obviously the RPG. I know the RPG. They were playing it in my uni when I was at university in 2000. It just boggles my brain that's 22 years ago. In my mind, 2000 was like yesterday, and
Isn't the 30th anniversary of Vampire the Masquerade this year, 2022?
I believe so. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we talked about again. That's 3 years ago. I mean, are you got anything planned for the 30th anniversary of Vampire and V5? Well, not V5.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah,
okay.
That's not. I'm not breaking by any NDAs by saying I have no knowledge of any of that. Yeah.
So Pete was sort of talking to you before the podcast about what you do as well with the security side of things. Can you talk us to us about that?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I've never worked for any government or governmental agencies. I've strictly been an academic when it comes to counterterrorism and counterintelligence. That's my graduate degree. I have a master's in international security policy from Columbia University. And my focus was, counterintelligence and I guess what you would call third world security policy, especially in the Middle East and North Africa. Wow. I worked at the Middle East Institute for about 2 years as their non-resident energy and security scholar.
Oh,
Okay, so I mean that's kind of massive. Just in one hand you're reading about vampires and werewolves, on the other hand you're writing about security policy. That's
Yeah.
complete. That's complete. How
I
did?
mean, kind of. Well, in high school, I mean, I didn't plan for this, but in high school, I read The Prize by Daniel Jurgen, which is basically the history of oil.
Yeah.
And so it basically goes from the very start of oil as a natural resource all the way to the modern day. At least back in, I assume they've updated it by now. It's been a long time since I was in high school. And at the same time, I read Dune by Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
So I read those books side to side, and they were very good companion pieces. One was about the real world exploitation, colonialism, and just the way our entire planet runs on these fossil fuels, and what that means for us on several levels, not just economically but environmentally and politically. And why these countries that have these resources or are near these resources are constantly being, the word we use is penetrated, constantly being penetrated by outside actors, usually Western powers, European and American, because they want what they have. And Dune very much explores that. And I worked on the Dune RPG, actually, the one that was just recently released by
Oh.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, I bring that up because I've always been interested in politics, human behavior, and how we have to, as people, read between the lines of what's happening and what's presented to us. Because a lot of times things are presented to us like, oh, that's a violent part of the world, or they don't have their stuff together over there because of their religion or the way they're raised or their culture. And we don't talk about, well, they were occupied by a foreign country by 150 years because they wanted their gold or their oil or their diamonds. And so when those countries left, they left them in ruins, usually, or strictly as, suppliers of this resource with no other, infrastructure. So for me, it really spoke to this kind of not really hidden world, but it definitely showed that we have to be circumspect when we're presented with these ideas, whether in the media or from our governments, that there are people in this world that are in their desperate situations or positions because they somehow deserve it or it's their fault, without us thinking about the material circumstances they may have been in that were caused by outside actors.
Products of their environment, basically.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a very that. I mean, I don't know if they say that over here, but that's a very American term. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, Matt.
No, I was just say it's very much the case that you can just blame people for, and I try to think about it myself. If you're, there's a lot of sort of, how do you put this without small-mindedness in the UK, in Northern Ireland, where I'm from, especially in small villages and things like that, where it's like, and they have views that sort of maybe more worldly people wouldn't hold because they think, but because they're products of their environment, all they have is what they know, and it's easy just to blame them for being them when really there's more to it. Schooling, government, everything like that, and it's all too easy just to just blame or point fingers at when really there is a lot more depth to it and something that you need to sort of kind of bear in mind. And I'm by all means, not by all means, I'm very I'm guilty of pointing fingers, especially in Northern Ireland, quite a lot. But I try my best to sort of kind of say, right, there is more to this than just what it is, what the facade is, what the front of it is.
Yeah, I think there's like too much. It's too easy to simplify what is a complex problem.
Yes, I think that's
the sound bites.
Yeah.
Would that be fair, Kheldoun? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the main way I guess I run into it is that in the U.S. There's not a lot of emphasis on critical analysis of the media we consume in our schooling and in our society. It's kind of seen as I guess, snooty or putting on airs, that kind of thing, which is seen as bad. And that's something reinforced by, the media society here. So it's almost a feature. It's not a bug of our school system that critical analysis is just not something that children engage in and will not engage in until they're out of high school on a real level. Like at best, they'll read Catcher in the Rye in high school and, get whatever terrible message they get out of that without a lot of real, in-depth thinking on, well, what does this mean? What is behind the words? What is the subtext? And that can be very difficult as a writer because a lot of times you don't, and especially in a role-playing game like Vampire the Masquerade or even Dune or even Cthulhu, but especially in Vampire the Masquerade, where you don't want to spell things out. You want to leave shadowy gray areas so that players and storytellers can explore those areas. But it can be difficult when some of your audience just, is just not used to reading any subtext or the implications of things. They take the word as written as, I guess what people call canon or law, and that's that. And, that's not their fault. And it can lead to gatekeeping behavior and all that. I think that's one of the reasons V5 very much doesn't put the lore center stage. That it's a background issue, is so the subtext in some way can become text.
I have to say, one of my biggest pet peeves. I did a military history degree, and it personally helped me quite a lot. Because doing history, you have to look at both sides of the sort of story, basically,
and the motivations of the author.
Yeah, exactly. So there's I'm trying to think of examples. There's some books, and the name of the author completely escapes me. I was very much into sort of Napoleonic history and stuff, and you had the Battle of Waterloo, and it's deemed as this big British victory. We beat the French and won the war and stuff. And then there's a set of books, and it's called Waterloo Campaign: The German Victory, and it's basically about, because a lot of the British army were King's German Legion, and then obviously you had the Prussians, you had Hanoverians, you had a lot of Germans, and they don't get their sort of it's just seen as a British victory, not as a sort of a German victory. And I kind of like when people do that sort of thing. They sort of kind of they flip the sort of the what's the word the known, not the known history, this sort of canonical history, and kind of go, well, this is kind of what it is. And doing my history degree, it was very much a case of, so this is what you're told, but is there another side to it? And we used to have a professor who would sort of go, right, you are, I don't know, he sort of, like, one example he did one, he says, World War II, you're the Allies, you're the Nazis, what's happening, why are you doing this and stuff? And like, you had the art, I wasn't on the Nazi side, but it was just basically, you had to basically make an art, even though you fundamentally disagreed with everything they were about. It was all about making you being able to see the other side of the proverbial coin, as it were. And this is a long way around to my point. I really hate it when you have history movies come out and they portray things that are completely wrong, and this, like, Hollywood's really bad at historical films sometimes, and they just go, this is how it is. And people, because they just don't want to learn any different, they don't want to know any differently, they want to be spoon-fed that they're going, okay, yeah, that's the way it is. And you have people arguing with me about history and stuff, and I was like, but that's not how it is. It might have been in that film, like Braveheart's a prime example of just historical blasphemy and stuff, but it's just like, this is what happened. It's not what it's not what happened, and that's not the way he was, and blah 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 blah. But people just want to believe that, and that frustrates me slightly, because people will just read it or will just watch it, and they will take that as canon and not go any deeper. And I personally think a lot of the world's woes would be fixed if people could see a bit more on the other side of the coin. Unfortunately, countries you live in, nearly every single country, irrespective of your your sort of maybe recent neutrality, or known for being a good country, inverted commas, you've probably done a lot of bad shit in your past, and people completely gloss over that. And I think it's very much something that people need to understand and accept, especially in the UK. We've done a lot of bad stuff in the past, and you just have to accept it. That's something you've done. Doesn't mean you have to dwell on it. Doesn't mean you have to not be apologetic for it, but you need to understand that was where you came from, and this is who you are now. And I think having stuff where people are just sort of spoon-fed it is frustrating, because it sort of paints a picture that isn't real, and that's, I think, where you get really sort of strong. This is completely off topic, by the way. I'm sorry, apologies. I should have gone off on a bit of a rant, but you go off on these sort of like you get very sort of strong nationalistic and patriotic views based on one-sided stories, and I think you need to look at things more deeply. If you find something, personally, if I learned something, if you were to tell me something, I go, that's interesting, and I would go out and I would pick the article that argues the counter, just so I have an even sort of view on that. And yeah, sorry. Sorry.
Matt Rant.
Yeah, Matt Rant. No, Matt Rant. Yeah, just very, yeah.
Well, I mean, like, critical analysis plays an important role for you in many ways in both sides of your writing career, both as energy security and also in RPGs. You kind of have to balance everything out, very much so.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
I was like, I imagine like critical analysis plays an important role for you in both sides of your career.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, for strictly on the RPG side, I can say that people have to buy into this reality, and this reality has certain rules, and that is really the power of lore, and you really see it nowadays in video games, that usually the video games that have the strongest following and the most dedicated followings are the ones that have some kind of lore, whether that's Five Nights at Freddy's or Undertale or what have you, Dark Souls. They have an interesting story internally that you yourself can internalize while playing the game, and that will affect how you play in a sense, because you've internalized certain ideas and roles. And so I can understand why on some level there can be like a fear of not having enough lore, or that your lore is mismatched somehow with the internal lore of the other people playing, because then you get the sense that you're not playing the same game. You're not playing the same, mental world. And critical analysis is very important, because you have to basically, while writing, say, well, what would this Lasombra think about the Sabbat basically trying to erase clan identity? As a Lasombra who's stayed in the Sabbat and is not going to join the Camarilla like some of his fellows, like, how is he going to think about the Sabbat's kind of push that clan doesn't matter? From coming from a clan who used to be on top and is now kind of on the bottom. Is he going to like that? Is he going to hate that? And what is going to be his process when he comes to his conclusion? And in our book on the Vault, we do that with all the clans. We kind of have a section called Anti-Tribu, because the Sabbat basically believes that clan identity is bad, and that they're all just vampires under Cain and Lilith and all that. But how does that work? What do the clans and members of that clan think about that? And we break that down clan by clan, and that requires a lot of critical analysis and thought of the old lore and the current lore, and it's important because in a sense, even in our daily lives, we live in a virtual world. We live in a world that's not real. Like, we don't go and hunt our food. We don't build our houses. We don't do any of that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we do, say, think, which is based upon an image of reality, but not reality. Like, when a news reporter tells us something, we are taking it on faith that they're not lying to us. We never witness these car accidents. We don't witness these plane crashes or terrorist atrocities, whatnot. And nor probably would you want to. But if you trust the system and take it on faith, then you're living in that reality where those things occurred with everyone else. And that's why it can be very jarring to meet someone who has a different idea of the lore than you do, because it's almost like meeting someone who believes in a conspiracy theory in the real world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So someone who doesn't know, all the vampire lore that you know from 20, 30 years of playing vampire, when they start talking about vampire, you're like, well, no, that's, that messes with your internal logic, your vision of reality. And that can be difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading the One Ring role-playing game core rulebook today, and it came up with a great idea for lore, which is assume everything before is by an unreliable narrator.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought that was genius because, I mean, like they brought the writing cadres gave an example of Dwalin in the Fellowship of the Ring, not Fellowship of the Ring, sorry, in The Hobbit. He goes from being saved by a hobbit from the trolls to, at the end of the book, being this kind of axe-wielding fury berserker.
Right.
And it kind of like, well, how did that happen? And said, or maybe it was because this is a book that was written by Bilbo Baggins, and it was his version of the events that happened. And basically, any version is purely from a single perspective and is not sort of like the neutral third party.
Oh, is this to stop you getting bogged down in sort of Lord of the Rings lore and stuff?
Exactly. And I think like, though, it's kind of, that's what you need to do with any sort of established lore, is really kind of approach it as like, did it happen? Or maybe it could have happened like this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you always have to think of who is telling me this.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an answer to the who is telling you that, then you have to assume that that narrator has a reason for hiding their identity and therefore their biases. And once you do that, like in our book, we make some changes, not really changes, but there's some parts of Tremere lore we don't want to delve into in our book that were presented mostly in Dark Ages and a few clan novels. And so we wanted to give permission, I guess is the best way to play it, to players and STs to consider that stuff unreliable. So we found ways not necessarily to change the lore, but to make things more ambiguous. Like we refer to Goratrix, the famous Tremere betrayer of the Sabbat. We talk about the House Goratrix in the book and how Tremere and Tribu work and all that. And we present Goratrix with she, they pronouns, while traditionally they were presented as strictly, male, he, him pronouns in some of the old books. But there's a lot of lore associated with Goratrix, which is very problematic. Could be considered, misogynistic or even homophobic on some levels, that we really didn't want to move forward into our book. And I don't know how V5 officially is going to deal with that material. They haven't, I guess, they haven't touched it. Maybe, I don't know why. But we didn't want to bring that forward into our book while making Goratrix such an important character in the book. I mean, they're not on every page or anything, but there's a lore sheet, about them and they're mentioned. So we wanted to fuzzy things up and present the character in a way that made more sense. Also, the name is feminine in most language conjugates, so it is what it is on that level. But we never reveal their gender. Like, we reveal their pronouns, but not their gender. So hopefully that won't be too big of a controversy.
Yeah, I remember like Mage, the M20 line, kind of took the rather than kind of baking in like the law set, they basically gave 3 interpretations of each law element. I was supposed great, like, and how it would impact the game. For example, it was the Future Fate section where it went like the Avatar storm. Is it still here? Yes. Okay, then there's this happen. Is it still here but milder? Yes, and this happens. Is it still here? No, it just passed, and now we can get into the Umbra and beyond without any problems. So it really kind of give 3 different or interpretations of each element of the law.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can't have everything.
Yeah.
Like in revised, there was the Withering.
Yeah.
Which is talked about in the clan novels mostly, isn't really discussed so much in the actual RPGs. But basically, kind of a flip side of the Beckoning, where instead of the elders disappearing, they're getting, weaker, and the curse of Cain on some level has weakened. So the vampiric powers in general are weaker. Like that, as far as I understand, is not mentioned at all in V5.
No.
You know, but it was something that was presented in the clan novels, was an issue, was kind of the forefront of Gehenna. And of course, you know, in older editions, they do Gehenna, like, you know, the antediluvians appear and start eating people, and, you know, close down the whole shop to create Requiem. So obviously that's not touched upon in V5. This isn't a, in a sense, it's not a post-Gehenna war. It's a, you know, it's a, sorry, post-Gehenna world. It's a Gehenna world. Like this is what the world looks like as Gehenna begins, in a sense.
Yeah.
With again, back to me being a complete noob and not understanding, the Sabbat, you're saying, like, are effectively the bad guys, inverted commas. Are they, so the whole game is like you're trying to keep your humanity and you're trying to you know, not be known as a vampire by the general public and stuff. Are they completely against that? Are they just literally, I'm a fucking vampire, and they just go out and eat people and stuff, or drain them of blood?
Yeah, I mean, so I worked on a Requiem book back in the day called Belial's Brood. And Belial's Brood had the same kind of thing where they were the bad guy vampires, and, you know, they didn't care about, you know, hiding, and they wanted to be vampires and blah, blah, blah. And how does that work when we made it, you know, a playable faction in Requiem? So basically one thing that we kind of hit upon in Belial's Brood, and I feel the Sabbat book in some ways hits upon it as well, which is that they don't care about, you know, mortals. And in some senses, they don't even care about other vampires. So they're not out there breaking the Masquerade to break the Masquerade. Like, they don't particularly care about the Masquerade. They will hide when it suits their agenda. But breaking the Masquerade is not their goal. Taking over the mortal world now is not their goal. That's, you know, after the antediluvians are defeated. You know, the first step of taking over the world is, you know, killing the people who control it today, which, you know, shouldn't be surprising. And as far as the Camarine Anarchs are concerned, they only seek them out when it's in their larger interest. They no longer get into this, like, you know, piddling fisticuffs just to, like, prove a point or whatnot. So the idea is their concern are vampiric concerns, not their past mortal identity. So their concerns are destroying the antediluvians. And if there's a Camarine vampire or an Anarch vampire they think might be related to or know the location of a Methuselah or some other elder vampire, then that guy is on their target list. But they're not going to roll into a Camarilla city and start burning buildings just to, like, you know, get the TV cameras rolling, because that doesn't interest them. They have a goal in mind. And as far as a side point to your question, which is V5 is focused on, you know, humanity and the beast and all that. We kept all those V5 systems in the Black Hand playing the Sabbat because they're so elegant. You know, the hunger system, the touchstone system, even the humanity system. It's all in there still. But the way we redeveloped it, because we don't want to get back into path ratings and all that, and you spending experience to, like, be more on your path. We didn't really feel that served any goal other than giving you a sink for your really hard won experience points. So what we did is we redefined humanity for a Sabbat vampire. Once you're on a path, your humanity is no longer your moral compass or any of that stuff. It is strictly a rating of your ability to retain your personal mortal identity. So when you're on a path, as your humanity rating sinks, your ability to kind of remember who you were as a mortal degrades. As MSA with a humanity of 2 probably would no longer remember their original mortal face after, you know, shifting it around so many times over the years. And for touchstones, which are usually living people and can only be living people in the base game, in our book, we basically replace them with the rite. So once you get a path conviction, you have to link it up with a Sabbat rite, one of their sacred rituals. And if those rites are disrupted, disrespected, threatened, if implements central to those rites, such as the Baldry chalice or whatnot, or the sacred weapons used in a monomancy, are stolen or destroyed, they harm you just the way it would if a touchstone was. So we wanted to keep all those elegant systems and give reasons why the Sabbat could operate, and not just, you know, whoa, the Masquerade's broken because you're playing Sabbat, without it breaking the internal logic of the game.
All right.
Yeah, good. You know, there's almost sort of like a tactical reason for not breaking the Masquerade in the technical sense, because with the Second Inquisition out there, these the global security services and targeting blank bodies, like because we vampires do not generate heat signatures. With the firepower that a Second Inquisition team can lay down, or more accurately, very special forces groups can lay down. Do the Sabbat really want to start antagonizing and having a fight on two fronts against the Mephilusas and the global intelligence agencies as well? It's just not a tactical, logical sense. It does not make tactical sense.
And again, I'm because I'm interested. I'm learning who are these other people. What was the name of them? The
Second Inquisition.
No. What you meant they were sort of going against the
the Mephilusas.
Antediluvians.
Yes, Antediluvians. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Who are they?
Oh, they're the founders of the vampire clans, basically. So they may be mythological, they may be real, but there are vampire clans. They're pretty distinct and obvious, and not only mechanically enforced, but thematically enforced in the story. And so the first vampires who started those strains, those bloodlines, are called the Antediluvians, the vampires who came before the flood, as described in the Bible, basically.
All right.
They're also known as the third generation, the progenitors, that kind of thing. They're kind of ancestor worshipped in parts of the Camarilla. They're considered a myth by most other vampires, and in the Sabbat, not only are they real, but they're basically immortal, unstoppable, unkillable blood gods that they will have to find some, mythological or divine or profane loophole to kill.
Yeah, I mean, they have, maybe possibly technically killed one of them with Zaprusa, the Ravnos Antediluvian. Right.
Well, I mean, in the Week of Nightmares lore sheet and the write-up and the lore, it's presented as, the originator of the Ravnos clan, and the new Ravnos clan discipline has to do with, if you sleep in one place too often, you burn up. So that's kind of the implication, but whether that was actually the Ravnos Antediluvian or not is never truly confirmed, but that is what people say. But as far as the Sabbat is concerned, Antediluvians cannot be killed and have not been killed. As far as our book, I should say.
Yeah.
In the Storyteller's Vault. So in official canon, they don't really talk about too much. In the V5 Sabbat book, I actually did write the section of the Antediluvians as a thematic element, and I use a lot of those seeds to kind of expand upon in our community content book, which is basically like, how do you kill something that can't die? We also kind of delve into the Lasombra, how they defected from the Sabbat, and perhaps one of the reasons they defected is because of because their conceit to leadership, that they killed their Antediluvian, was a lie, and now everybody knows it. And so by being exposed in that way, their leadership was now contested on all ends. And, Sombra being La Sombra, they decided they would rather be somebody else's shadow. And once the light was shined on them, they disappeared. It is an interesting concept of how do you keep people fighting what you admit is an unwinnable war, and what are their thought processes, what is their faith like to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you have any plans for V5 and other role-playing games plans for the future?
Yes, well, the Second Inquisition book, which I wrote on, which, yet again, let me use some of my real-world experience.
Yeah.
Is coming out. It was with Kat Evans and Kenneth Haidt, and I believe Kenneth also has a background in international affairs and such. And of course, he wrote Night's Black Agents and several other books that
That's a fantastic game.
It is a really good book, and other like paramilitary operations hunting vampires. So that's coming out in I think in mid-March. So that's a V5 canon official book, and I think that should be pretty interesting.
Is the Second Inquisition as a playable antagonist, or is it purely a storyteller antagonist?
It's purely that book is purely storyteller. That book is storyteller focused. The second edition is presented as antagonist. There are no rules in there to play a second edition hunter. Hunter fifth edition is coming out.
That's true.
But of course, that focuses on more, not, I won't say street level, but definitely on more individual groups of hunters. Not the Second Inquisition, which is basically a global conspiracy which is misusing government resources to hunt vampires and do other things. Because as with all mortal institutions, especially those in an illegal global conspiracy, they are not going to use those powers just to hunt vampires once they have on them. They have their own interests that they're going to go about, and that can. I'm sure that blunts their efficiency in the whole vampire hunting thing.
Did you ever watch the BBC 6-part TV series called Ultraviolet? Not the Mila Jovovich film, the 90s TV series.
I've heard of it. And I know it's been it actually has been referenced to me a few times, but I don't actually think I've ever seen it. No, I don't think so.
It's a fantastic TV series. It's basically, what if there was a government-sanctioned department of MI5 tasked with hunting vampires, and it was great because it was like how do you kill someone that is effectively unkillable? Right. And they never mentioned vampires. They never used the V word. It's always like code 5s, because Roman numeral for 5 is V, and just really neat touches of like on what it will mean as a person to go around and hunt a vampire that is not believed. So yes, if you get the chance, really do recommend it. Absolutely love that TV series.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. And as far as the Storyteller's Vault's concerned, we're hoping we've had very good success with this book so far. Very good. Our reviews are very good, and I think it hit Electrum Seller, which is 250 copy benchmark on Friday, and it's only been out, I guess, 2.5 weeks. So we were very happy with that. So building off of that, we're gonna write some scenarios, some like adventures where for Sabbat packs. We've contacted some other authors who've worked on the Vault before and on Vampire, and we're talking with them to see how they can basically use what's in our book, so that there will be adventures to play as Sabbat packs. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you're new to Vampire or new to the Sabbat.
Could we also expect a player's guide to Second Inquisition? Maybe.
I don't know about that. That would be a very thick book, I think.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure. I would have to find a lot more than just 2 other authors for that. For this book, I reached out to Saskia Liddick and Rachel Judd to help me write this, because they've both, Saskia, I've worked with her on several projects, including V5 projects, though I think we're on NDA for those. And Rachel, of course, has worked on Chronicle of Darkness books, and has a lot of books on the Vault. I mean, incredible bibliography on the Vault. So I got the right team together for the Second Inquisition. I don't even know who I would ask. Yeah.
I don't know if your bookshelf would take a book that big, Pete. It's buckling as it is, I think. You can see the bow. You can see.
Let us print on the Vault, so no fears. The bookshelf will be all right.
I'll make space. But no, I mean, I remember reading the core V5 book and thinking, the vampires sound great, but the second Inquisition sound fantastic. So I think, we'd like to get into something like that. But again, as you say, we have the Hunter's 5th edition coming out at some point, but that is again more independent groups rather than a global security network. But yeah, so and other than V5, what else have you got planned coming up?
For V5, I don't think anything. I have written some stuff, but I'm under NDA. Other than the Second Inquisition book, there. Hopefully, those projects will be announced soon. I think there's some announcement planned in the next few weeks, but I'm not quite sure if it's for that book. But there is a lot more V5 material coming out. I mean, Renegade and PDX have a lot of interesting things coming out, and not just books. I know New York by Night, the actual play, kind of I want to say sequel, but definitely the follow up to LA by Night. Jason Carl's incredible actual play of V5. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and what that does with all this new material. Because I mean, he started LA by Night, when there weren't a lot of V5 books on the shelves, So I'm sure he had some, insight to the meta plot from behind the scenes, of course. But it's a lot easier to follow along and add stuff to the story when people have, the books. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Cool. So, so Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, Sabbat the Black Hand is currently out now.
Yes. Sabbat the Black Hand is currently out now. You can buy that, from the Renegade store or the Storyteller's Vault. And our Storyteller's Vault book, The Black Hand Playing the Sabbat, not to confuse anyone.
The Player's Guide.
The Player's Guide, let's say, is also on the Storyteller's Vault. And there's a lot of very good Sabbat content on the Storyteller's Vault. I mean, obviously, I love my book the most. But there are several, there was a real hunger for it by the fans. So there's several books on there as well. Yeah.
Okay, give them a go. I have to say I'm quite interested. It's like Pete sort of kind of dragging me into this sort of thing. So I had Mage, I've had Mage one week, and now I've got sort of Vampire the Masquerade another. So yeah, I'll have to have.
Don't worry, I'll get someone from Werewolf lined up next, Matt. Don't worry.
yes. Okay. Well, it's been really interesting talking to you. Apologies again for the dropout in the middle there, but hopefully it will all be stitched together when I.
Well, I wouldn't have believed you guys were in the UK if there weren't weather problems. So
yeah. No, that's hashtag weather UK. Just the way it is. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. For tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Allison.
Good night, everybody. Take care of each other.
And Khaldoun Khelil.
Bye. Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.